Welcome to the show. My guest is Tom Topping, the Senior Director of Strategic Programs for FireEye. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let me set a little context for our discussion today. The federal government recognized early that it doesn't corner the market on cyber threat intelligence. The concept becomes even more important when you consider the growing use of connected devices and the fact that at least 85% of the nation's critical infrastructure is run by the private sector. The Homeland Security Department has launched several programs over the last 5 years to improve the collection and sharing of cyber threat data. DHS's Automated Indicator Sharing, or AIS program, turned 2 years old back in October as one example of those efforts. While progress to achieve a two-way sharing has become slower than maybe the agency and many others have hoped, there are more than 250 commercial organizations participating in AIS, where most of the sharing, unfortunately, is maybe one way, from government to industry, or as Tom may tell us, industry to government. We're going to get into that in a little bit. The implementation of the second generation of threat sharing standards called STIX and TAXII, TAXII with two I's in case you're keeping score at home, will help make this process easier, but it's not the only answer. And then you talk about the Defense Department. They're doing a ton of work around threat and information sharing. They're probably one among the leaders. The Joint Force Headquarters DoD Information Networks is testing a new data analytics platform that's meant to use automated data analytics techniques to spot the sorts of behavior adversaries have been known to engage in as they laid the groundwork for an attack. The integrated cyber intelligence platform is using only commercially provided threat data as DoD continues to prove out its use case. So how do agencies and industry share data more quickly and more easily? What can be done to overcome the remaining barriers? Well, that's where my guest comes in. Once again, Tom Topping, the Senior Director of Strategic Programs for FireEye. Tom, I laid out just some basics around cyber threat, but I'm actually going to start at the beginning of our conversation instead and go, really, when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, what is it?
Cyber threat intelligence is many things to many people. There's a lot of dialogue in the marketplace about cyber threat intelligence today, and the way I look at it is that there's cyber data and there's cyber information, and these are very specific pieces of information. But you've got to start with the data and the information, and then do analysis on that to provide insights that turn it into intelligence. So it's the combination of those three things: the data, the information, and the insights that it generates.
So some people say, what's the difference between data and information?
Data tends to be specific, discrete elements, and information might be a little bit larger pieces of information, but not broad stories or backgrounds or context.
And when we talk about the data, the information, turn them into intelligence, the real key piece here is the analytics that rides or that connects the two. Is that something that people are starting to use more and more of? I mean, what's the difference today with cyber threat intelligence than maybe 5 or 7 or 10 years ago?
Well, for one, there's a lot more of it. There's an absolute flood of cyber. Anything related to computers or a cyber attack is considered by some to be cyber threat intelligence. And then you use the term analytics, and you can throw all of that data into a database and start doing correlations on it. But really, for it to become intelligence, you need to analyze the data in such a way that it becomes useful. And to someone who needs to use it, it's got to be timely, it's got to be accurate, and they've got to be able to use it. So there you go.
All right, that's a good definition, because I think a lot of times we hear data, we hear information. Everyone loves to talk about big data analytics, but what is it? So the timely, the accuracy, and usability, I think, is key. I also hear the 5 V's of data analytics, right? Volume, velocity, veracity. I'm missing my other 2. Am I missing? Is there 5, or am I only 3 V's?
I'm not a data analytics expert, no. So you just push past the end of that boundary.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, we'll bring a data analytics person on later, and we'll get them to talk about it. When you talk about the use of cyber threat data, give me a sense of how it's being used today, and how's that maybe different than what's been in the past, and where are we going forward with the use of it? Because I think that's the keys, not just timely and accuracy, but really what does it mean to me?
Yep. It's being used in a variety of ways, and this is really important, because I see a huge opportunity for organizations today to leverage accurate, relevant, timely cyber information to really move the needle on how they're able to defend themselves. And what I mean by this is, if you can take cyber intelligence and use that to understand who your threat actors are, if you know who's coming after you and you know how they attack organizations, all of a sudden your problem becomes smaller. And that's one of the real key metrics that cyber intelligence, that you want cyber intelligence to do for you. You don't want it to flood you with data and make your problem harder. You want it to enable your organization to focus and then to take it from very specific indicators, all the way up to being able to talk to the executives about risk.
And you bring up risk, and we can't go anywhere without talking about cyber and cyber risk, and especially as we go down the path of broader conversation around supply chain risk management and insider threat risks. But let me have a step back and how can people use cyber threat intelligence to deal with those risks? And let's start with the CISOs and the CIOs, and then I want to move us to the program people and the executives. But start with CIOs and CISOs.
Sure. So, organizations first, if you look at the risk management framework or whatever framework you're using to determine what's appropriate to do, you have to understand what's at stake, right? What does somebody want to come and get? Is it credit card data? Is it PII? Is it personnel files? Is it medical records? Whatever it is that your organization has, maybe it's intellectual property. You have to understand what it is you're protecting and what are the consequences if that data becomes breached or destroyed. And that enables the organization and the leadership to define what the risk is. And it's only from that can an organization really decide what's appropriate with respect to how to address the risk. So once you decide what is at risk and what the consequences are of that bad thing happening, then you want to turn to cyber threat intelligence to look at those threat actors that are targeting that kind of information. And what tools are they using? What are their tools, techniques, and procedures that they're employing to breach organizations, compromise that information, and steal it or destroy it or whatever it is they're going to do. And that's how cyber threat intelligence can really make a difference for a lot of organizations is understanding how the threat actors are going to come and try to do what they're going to do, and how are they doing that today? How did they do it yesterday? How might they do it tomorrow? Because if you're trying to protect against everything, you can't. So the more you can focus, the more efficient you can get.
It seems to me that when we talk about risk management, and I think you can't go anywhere without somebody bringing up this idea of risk mitigation, risk management, the cyber threat is that next piece that says, okay, I understand what risks I have. Now, how do I deal with those risks? I mean, it seems to me like that's the next piece to this puzzle.
Yep. That was the point I was trying to make. And it goes all the way from the CIO and the CISO down to through the SOC and all the way down to the tactical level. So from from an operational point of view, if you understand who's going to come after you and how they're going to do it, you can make decisions about how your defensive cyber operations tools and people are deployed to align against those risks. Okay, that's an operational level and not the strategic risk level, but the operational level. And then down at the tactical level, if that cyber threat intelligence is deep and current, you can take those indicators and those TTPs and you can plug them into your sensors and look in those parts of your systems where the bad guys are going to operate, and you can give the people on the very front line the data and the direction they need to go find those threat actors that are the most concerning for you.
And what about at the higher level? You talked about the tactical level, the operational level, the CIO, CISO, but then you have the mission side and you also have the executive side. And I think, there's a big concern in the cybersecurity community that we've become numb to cyber attacks, to cyber threats, that we hear it happens so often. It's not a matter of when, if, it's a when question. So I can't do anything about it. I'll just deal with it. So how do you get the people at the higher levels of the CISO and CIO to understand that this cyber threat intelligence information is important, and how to use it too?
Well, that's a really good question, because comprehensive cyber threat intelligence can enable the operators, the people in the SOC and the people managing the SOC, and then the CISO to approach the executive team and talk to the executive team in terms of risk around whatever the mission or the business is for the organization. And that's how the leadership thinks. What's the risk to our organization? And they're not talking about tools, and they're not talking about IP addresses. They're talking about risks to the business or the agency or whatever the organization is. And having that cyber threat intelligence that can span that from tactical to strategic enables the folks to have a conversation with leadership around risks to the mission.
Where is this happening? Maybe any examples come to mind of maybe where this is happening well? Are you guys working with any customers that maybe you could talk to? I know maybe there's some sensitivities there, but even generally speaking, are you working with any organizations that are taking that information, that intelligence from the SOC level and making sure it gets funneled to the executive level?
Yeah, I've got a really good example. We have a customer that we began engaging, and one of the things we did to help them understand the risks facing them is we applied the indicators and the findings from previous attacks over the past 3 or 4 years, and we applied cyber threat intelligence to that. And what we ended up finding working with the customer was those were not discrete individual events. Those were all tied to the same threat actor, and they had been under a sustained attack by a specific threat actor for the last 3 years. And that was something that the SOC didn't know and leadership didn't know, but that really allowed the entire organization to understand both that there was something persistent going on, but help them focus on what they were after and again, focus their resources.
And I think that's really what this comes down to. There's limited resources. You can't protect everything.
That's right.
And what's the best computer is one that's unplugged, buried in a lead box underground or something to that effect. So by being able to understand what people are going after, what the adversaries are going after, and then what does it mean to you as a mission area, then that leads you to kind of refocus your resources. That's really where we're heading, though. I mean, that's the end result.
And that's the objective. That's exactly right. It's about being more effective at combating these threats for the same dollar. And no one can afford to protect from everything, and they'll never be able to be. So what we need to do is we need to focus and protect those things that need protecting the most, and protect them in ways that the people that will want to come and get them are going to use to come and get them. And if you can bring that focus to bear, you can do things far more efficiently. And in addition to saving money, not just on tools and things like that, but you'll end up having your people doing things that are more valuable. Every member of the team will be doing something more valuable because there will be greater levels of automation and there will be greater levels of focus. So then you've got folks really focused on the valuable problem.
You bring up automation. That can be a much longer conversation. We're going to head there in a second, and we're almost time for a quick break. Before we do that, let me get a quick sense of when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, it's coming from where most of the time? Is it coming from companies like FireEye? Is it coming from DHS? Give me a sense.
So a couple perspectives. From an organization perspective, as you said, Jason, it comes from everywhere. I mean, there's information sharing. They're generating cyber information off of the sensors in the agency or the organization. They're getting it from DHS. They probably have some relationships with some people they used to work with, and they're sharing it that way. But that, again, is cyber data. And many organizations are turning to the commercial market, and they're acquiring data from the commercial market. And, they have to be very specific and careful that what they're getting from there and they're beginning to utilize, again, to go back to it, that it's accurate, that it's timely, and that it's relevant to them. I mean, if they're getting a big stream of bad domain names and those things are relevant to people getting attacked in Eastern Europe, it's noise to them. It's complicating the problem. Yeah, there's a lot of folks out there, and people should look closely.
All right, good advice. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we can jump into some of these other topics, including probably automation. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.